So as every presentation we begin here, we got to start with a disclaimer. And just remember that nothing here is financial, tax, or legal advice. This crypto Q&A does occur every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You also can interact with me, Marcus, and a few other members here in Clubhouse from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. And you also obviously can find our daily videos on the YouTube channel and Instagram and Twitter. Today, we're going to talk about geopolitics, and this is our roadmap. We're going to divide this presentation in two parts, the three-power dynamic, and then we're going to talk about great power politics. And sometime on the next presentation, we're going to talk about US versus China and US versus Russia. So first, let's talk about the three-power dynamics. And we're talking about US, China, and Russia in case you do not recognize those three flags. Now, between 1947 and 1989, when you guys were born, and I was not here yet, I came way after that, but for those who were born between 1947 and 1989, they lived in a world where it was a very straight power dynamic. There was capitalism represented by the US, and there was communism represented by China. And that was the one conflict, two superpowers. Now, of course, when you look at the flags, it's a bit boring. So what we do is we do this. It's easier if we imagine those countries are being the biggest animals in the forest. So if you look at King Kong representing US and T-Rex representing communism, you can see that these were the two big monsters in the forest. All the other countries were too small to make a difference. Those two are the ones that were in a constant conflict. That was a bipolar world between 1949 and 1989. And of course, eventually, communism lost. King Kong became the king of the forest, and no other major big animal on the forest, only King Kong, US, and no one able to threaten or to come against US. And from December 91, we have what we call the unipolar or monopolar world, where we only have one superpower. King Kong won the fight. No one else can threaten King Kong. And that was a very simple world. No one could challenge a superpower. So I say 2017, my memory can be failing me. We start to have a different kind of conflict between China and US, but the dynamic somewhere between 2015 and 2019, it became a three-power dynamic. A dynamic where we have the winner, which is King Kong, the US, that's why the flag is bigger. And we have a small Godzilla, but again, growing to big enough to challenge King Kong, which is China. And we have the smaller of all them, Russia, which is a baby T-Rex. So the world we are walking towards now is a world where there's no longer just two superpower, but maybe three superpower. And the problem with this dynamic is now we don't have a clear cut, because before was King Kong and T-Rex or communism versus capitalism. The dynamic we have today is a bit different because we have different possibilities of conflict. We have the possibility of Godzilla, China, challenging King Kong, and we have the possibility of a conflict between T-Rex, baby T-Rex, and China, the Godzilla, or we have the possibility of those two ganging up on US, and we had the possibility of US in conflict with Russia, which is exactly what we have now. So there are many more dynamics and many more chances for conflict when you have three superpowers. And yes, Russia is the smaller one of all them. China is catching up, but this is far more dangerous than just a straightforward world where there was two superpowers. So China is the main player, is the one that has the possibility to come and confront the big King Kong. So I think eventually this scene is going to become unescapable. The little Godzilla is going to become big enough to challenge the big King Kong, which is the US. I think this is where we're going to have the bigger conflict in the future. And I'm going to make a presentation talking more about that. So remember, Russia is the weakest, but Russia can gang up with Godzilla and come after King Kong. Remember that now we have not just two chances of conflicts, but more chances of conflicts, as I explained to you guys. Those two can gang up against this one can come after this one, and this one can come after that one. So there's many other dynamics of conflict. So now that you guys can see that possibility of three superpowers, let's talk about a theory that I found from Meyer called the great power politics. And the great power politics starts saying that we humans will live as a very happy family in this planet. Of course, that's a joke. A lot of people believe that's the way we live. We have a diversity human family in the planet. That is a very dangerous view because it's not realistic. That is not reality. It would be very beautiful if it was so, but it isn't. That's one is a dead wrong vision. So the vision of Meyer come with 5 axioms or 5 premises. And I'm going to go one by one here. The first one is anarchy. The second one is the capability of violence. The third one is uncertainty of intentions. The fourth one is the goal of survival. And the fifth one is that all actions are rational. So let's talk about those 5 premises one by one. He says that the world is an anarchy because there's not one super leader deciding what each state can do. So the world is composed of different states, nations, countries, whatever you want to call it. And those states have one authority, and there's no authority higher than the president, the prime minister, whatever you want to call the leader of that state. Now, because the leader of those states live in a world where every other leader do whatever they want, and there's no one single central authority, they all have to be capable of violence. All participants on this game are states, and all states, they must be capable of violence. If you're not capable of violence, you do not have a state. And the best example I can give you guys of this is Tibet. The Dalai Lama is a non-violent person. He does not have a state. You can only have a state if you have the capability to defend that territory. So all participants of this world of anarchy are capable of violence. And the thing is, the capability of violence is measurable. You can see how much troops they have. Are they nuclear power? They have no nuclear power. What is the amount of submarines, the amount of airplanes? The capability of violence is measurable. We can very safely say that Portugal has less capability of violence when comparing to the US. We can also say that Portugal has less capability of violence when compared to Russia. So the capability of violence or the threat of violence is measurable. So the first axiom, all states have a supreme leader and no one above them to decide what happens on that state, which makes anarchy, and all states must be capable of violence, otherwise they do not survive. Let's go to the third axiom. The other thing is we do not know the intentions. All of those nation leaders, state leaders, they do have an intention, but the thing is we do not know what those intentions are. Intentions are not measurable. And even if you know the intention today, no one knows who's going to be the president of the US 15 years from now. No one knows who's going to be the leader of Russia 15 years from now. No one can guarantee who's going to be the leader of India or China 15 years from now. So even though you have an idea of the intentions today, you cannot have the guarantee of that intention in the future. But one thing we can all agree, and what we can agree is every state wants to survive. So they're all capable of violence. We do not know what their intentions are, but we know for sure that their goal is to survive. If a state has no goal of survival, it is not a successful state. So that is another axiom. Now, if their goal is to survive, we can start to imagine that every action that a state takes has as its outcome the preservation of the state, which means it is rational. You can just imagine, it may not seem rational to you because you may have limited information. It may not seem rational to anyone else watching because the leader may have also some limited information. It may be wrong, but it is not irrational. Every state leader would take actions to preserve the survival of the state and to preserve their power. They want to survive. And if you believe on that, then we can start to say, okay, we do not know their intentions, but we know they need to act in a way that reasonably will ensure their survival. Those are the premises. Remember, the entire planet is an anarchy because there are 200 states or more, a little bit over 200 states. All those states have capability of violence. We do not know their intentions. We do understand they want to survive. And if they want to survive, we can expect them to act in a rational way that will preserve those survival. I call those things 5 axioms because I believe it's very difficult to dispute those things. So those are the 5 premises or the 5 axioms to the argument. And then we can put that to the test. Now, this is just a theory, and every theory has contradictions. I can give a name or in history or point a point where this theory does not hold water. Of course, it's simplifying the world because we need to simplify the world around us, but those 5 axioms are very difficult to be debunked. Now, if they are real, if they are reality, that means we all live in a very dangerous world. Why is dangerous? Well, first, because there's anarchy. We live in an anarchy where all participants are capable of violence, and we have no clue what their intentions are. If this is not a recipe for danger, I do not know what is a recipe for danger. Anarchy, capability of violence, and no way for us to know their intentions. And again, we can assume that their intention is to remain alive. So how you remain alive? I think there's something with the presentation was transparent before. I don't know what it is right now. Because the only way for you to ensure your survival is to become the King Kong of the forest. You must become the biggest animal on the forest. You must become the most powerful player on the board game. So when you have anarchy and all players capable of violence and no certainty of intentions, the only way to ensure your survival is to become the King Kong or the Godzilla of that forest. You must become the most powerful. And there is a joke that I make to make this point. And the question is, where does a 5-ton gorilla sleep? Imagine a gorilla that weighs 5 tons. Where does he sleep? So the answer is very simple. Whatever he wants, who's going to wake him up? Now, another thing that guarantees your survival is either you remain the biggest one or you prevent others from becoming big. And we can see this play out in history all the time. If you are not the biggest one, if you cannot grow anymore, what you do is you prevent your opponent from gaining power. Who is your opponent? Anyone and everyone. And I know some people have this theory where democracies do not declare war on each other. I say, okay, I will believe that the day that France and every other country does not put a cap on how much military forces Germany can have. Germany is a democracy, so is France. And if you are really confident that Germany is a democracy and democracy does not declare war on each other, why can't Germany become the most powerful country in Europe? Because again, we do not know the intentions. We know the intentions of Germany today. We do not know the intentions of Germany in the future. So the idea of democracy do not declare war on each other does not hold water in this theory. So let's look at some examples of becoming the most powerful. The US has the largest number of military bases worldwide, and they have bases on every single continent. You can see here a map. All these little circles are military bases somewhere, and all the places that have the red color are places where they have military bases from the US. So US is by far the biggest gorilla in the forest. It is King Kong. It has 5,000 bases with 600 overseas and 1,000 foreign sites with installations and facilities on the entire planet. So one example of, for instance, preventing others from gaining power, you can see US preventing China from extending to Taiwan. You can see here Biden, for instance, promising that it would help Taiwan if China attacks. Remember, China wants to become the big Godzilla, and the US must prevent that Godzilla from growing. We can see here, the US support the Philippines in South China Sea. Why? Because China is becoming too big and they need to prevent China from growing. You can see more of that. South Korea declare enhanced partnership to deter North Korea. So again, the US is there. America as a country, as the big gorilla, has no other option. I'm not trying to condemn the US. All I'm trying to say is they have no other option. They have to prevent any other player from becoming very big. So with this, I'm going to give a recap to you guys. We talk about the three-power dynamic, which is more dangerous than a bipolar world. And we gave an introduction to the theory of the great power politics, where we talk about anarchy, capability of violence, no way to determine intentions. We can determine that the goal is survival, and the rationale is going to be how to remain alive. On the next part, US versus China and US versus Russia. And if you want to have more control over your finance, over your money, please consider joining the Crypto Vagabonds Academy. And with this, I stop sharing and I answer you guys' questions if there's any.